Hi everyone, it's been a while. I haven't been doing videos for the past weeks because I had health issues and I also had to go through an operation, but now everything is fine. I'm well and fit again, and I'm eager to do new videos and share my thoughts with you. Today I want to talk about a German writer called Manfred Kleine-Hartlage and his book Warum kein, mehr bin, why I am no more a left-winger, published by the New Right publishing house Antaios in their series called Kaplaken. These are these small books consisting of about 75 to 95 pages. It's a small format, not very much text per page, but they contain a lot of interesting information and interesting thoughts. I will in the next weeks talk about a few of the other books in this series about conservatism and so on. But now, today it will be about this book, Warum kein, mehr bin, because it's a very interesting topic, because it's about a person who used to be left-wing for decades and then he changed his mind, of course over time, and became right-wing, and today he's active as a right-wing writer. He has his own blog, he's writing books about Islam and about various other things, and it's very interesting in the book to follow his development from a left-winger to a right-winger, and he gives a very good, a very thorough analysis on these few pages of the left-wing mind, so to speak. What makes people become left-wing and what makes them give up this ideology, those who do. So I hope this will be interesting. I will talk about a few other topics in my next videos. I will discuss South Africa and the problems there with the population with a European origin. I don't like to say whites because it's racist. I will also talk about the issue of color and about Laura Southern, who traveled there earlier this year and made a lot of interviews with the victims of violence, the farmers, and this will certainly be an interesting topic to discuss. I will also tomorrow go to the movies here in Munich, and I will see the new Steven Spielberg movie, which is called Ready Player One, and I will talk about it in a video which I hope will be coming up tomorrow. And of course I will come back to the topic of philosophy and discuss a few philosophical books, and I will also come back to fantasy. I am right now writing the last chapter in my new fantasy novel, which is the second volume in my fantasy series, which started with White Lights, which came out in June 2 years ago, and after I finish this last chapter I will also write the epilogue, and then I will rewrite a few chapters, and I hope to publish this book this summer. So I look forward to talk about this book as well, and also about the relationship between politics and fantasy and philosophy, because this channel is about all three of these topics, and that's not a coincidence. It's not just the fact that I'm interested in all three of these, but they also belong together and can also be discussed in the same work, like in a novel. So I hope this discussion of the book Warum kein, mehr bin, why I am no longer left-wing by Manfred Kleine-Hartlage will be interesting. Please give me your thoughts below, what you thought about this little presentation, if you want more discussions like this, and I'll talk to you soon again. Today, Kleine-Hartlage is known as being politically right-wing, criticizing political correctness, the Islamization of Germany, and manipulation by the political class, and supporting free speech and the rights of the people to decide for themselves. But until a few years before publication of this book, Kleine-Hartlage was himself a leftist, after having become a member of the Social Democratic Party here in Germany at age 15. What made him give up the leftist ideology was not attraction to the right, but the inconsistency of the leftist views. For decades, he used to ignore important facts, because following the leftist ideology, these things could simply not exist. Finally, however, he had to ask himself, why do leftists, while claiming to be pacifists, sympathize with terrorist organizations? Why do or did they support communist dictators while constantly criticizing what they take to be repression in their own country? Why do they support free immigration if they are so much in favor of the welfare state? And above all else, why do they sympathize with Islam, with its contempt for women, its anti-Semitism, its love of violence, its authoritarianism and intolerance? To answer this question, Kleine-Hartlage distinguishes between two kinds of leftists, the deceivers and the deceived. The deceivers are the ones in power who profit from the leftist lies, and for this reason they will never give up their ideology. The deceived, however, are those who are not in power, and they can free themselves from their ideological slavery, like Kleine-Hartlage himself did. Here in Germany, leftist ideology dominates the public discourse in the media and in the academic world, without representing the views of the normal citizen. Why is it so attractive to the educated? Leftist ideology is utopianism. Understanding the world as it actually is tiring and time-consuming. It is far easier to imagine how it ought to be, which gives one the illusion of knowledge without the work required for possessing real knowledge. In a sane society, people are forced to face reality when growing up, which eventually will make them give up their utopianism. In our present Western society, this does not occur. On the contrary, utopianism and disregard of facts may further one's career in media, in politics, and at the universities. This is especially true within the social sciences and the humanities, faculties which grew massively after 1968. 6 out of 7 journalists in Germany vote for left-wing parties. Another reason is the personality type which Kleine-Hartlage calls the bourgeois, which has a tendency to accept the values and ideology dominant in his or her own society, whatever these are, out of a lack of principles and character. Today, the dominant ideology in Germany is leftist utopianism. The core of this utopianism is the ideal of complete equality between men and between nations. All hierarchies and power structures are to be abolished, between rich and poor, majority and minorities, educated and uneducated, men and women, and between industrialized and developing countries. The leftist always takes the side of what he or she considers to be the weaker part, which is seen as a victim of exploitation. Only the weaker has rights, only the stronger has duties. This attitude leads to the forming of conspiracy theories, of all men secretly wanting to suppress all women, and the rich wanting to suppress the poor. For these reasons, leftists are not willing to accept the structure of a free society, because this implies an inequality of power. Fighting existing hierarchies and power structures requires controlling these hierarchies and structures, which is only possible by establishing new hierarchies and structures, infinitely more rigid and suppressive than the old ones. Thus, the striving for complete equality always leads to its extreme opposite, the totalitarian police state. Leftist politics results in more and more government control, discrimination of the competent, lack of incentives for honest, hard work, impoverishment of the population, increasing racial unrest and violence, and eventually it will lead to the downfall of Western civilization. The leftists are unable to see this because they take freedom and civilization for granted. Being completely focused on a future society of their dreams, they do not consider the fact that their social experiments may ruin society. If they would consider empirical facts, they would have to admit to themselves that their dream of an earthly paradise in full equality can never turn into reality, and so they would have to give up their ideology. To avoid this conclusion, like fundamentalist Christians, they interpret the world from their ideology and reject what does not conform to it as being non-existent. Of course, since complete equality cannot be achieved, leftists are doomed to an eternal struggle and never to be content with the present state of things. This is true not just for radical leftists, but for moderate leftists like Social Democrats and Green parties as well. They just hide their utopianism of equality behind their rhetoric. Leftists, radical as well as moderate, cannot conceive of a political thinking that is not utopian. Consequently, they accuse all their critics of supporting rival forms of utopianism, like fascism or Christian fundamentalism. Representatives of other ideologies are not treated as participants in a democratic system, but as purely evil and as less than human, whereas the leftists themselves are beyond all reproach simply because of their belief in the future secular paradise, and in their acceptance of anything that could mean one step towards making this dream come true. Positive action on their own part is not required, and all kinds of crimes are being excused. In this, as in so many other things, leftists strongly resemble a religious cult. Knowledge of anything that questions the leftist ideology is considered an evil, in religious terms, blasphemy. Leftism is a secularized version of the longing for the future kingdom of God, and the fact that the leftists are unable to admit this is proof of their self-deceit. Ideology has replaced conscience. Of course, in reality, moral goodness requires constant struggle to overcome one's own weaknesses. To the leftists, every mean is acceptable which may help realizing the goal. History may be rewritten, the language changed, the Bible reinterpreted, etc. Rejecting one's own nation and people, one's cultural inheritance and traditions like the family, which all make up one's identity, is part of the leftist project, which thus implies a strong masochism. Furthermore, leftist thinking is based on fear. Leftists have a terrible fear of any kind of politics which does not correspond to their own ideology. Everything else is demonized and reduced to fascism or Nazism, for example. This includes not just people with right-wing leanings, but the views of normal, common-sense citizens as well. Enemies are sought and found not just outside but also inside the movement, and anyone who rejects or deviates from the doctrines is considered a potential Nazi, or as at least unconsciously helping the Nazis to gain power. Because of this lack of distance and autonomy on the part of individual leftists, small groups within the movement again and again succeed in manipulating it according to their own aims. Leftists regard themselves as being non-conformist and critical, but in practice they tend to demonstrate against things like nuclear power or for quotas, even if they don't believe in them, just because others do. This is from Kleine-Hartlage's own experience. Kleine-Hartlage himself talks of his own feeling of liberation when he was finally able to leave the ideology behind and let reality speak for itself. At last, thinking and feeling formed a unity, and he was able to trust himself and his own judgment, and accept that it is not necessary to hate what is alien, to defend what is your own. I disagree with a few of Kleine-Hartlage's statements. I don't think that ethical homogeneity is necessary for freedom, peace, and democracy. The problem is not ethnical heterogeneity as such. The problem is the import of people with anti-democratic values, which unfortunately to a great extent is the case with people from Islamic countries. 37% of the British Muslims either actively supported the attack on Charlie Hebdo in Paris in January 2015 or refused to distance themselves from it. And 35% of the French Muslims accept or support suicide bombings in the name of Islam. I also do not share Kleine-Hartlage's view of a socialist-capitalist conspiracy in support of mass immigration, where huge German companies align with the leftist political establishment in the hope of gaining access to cheap labor. Companies want educated people with relevant working experience, not refugees with just a few years of schooling and hardly any knowledge of the language spoken. However, Kleine-Hartlage may well be right in his claim that one of the reasons why leftists want mass immigration is that it means importing leftist voters, i.e., poor people who want to be taken care of by the state. In 2002, the Social Democratic Party here in Germany won the election because of their Turkish voters. Without these votes, the CDU, what was once a conservative party, would have won. Kleine-Hartlage also defends using expressions like Negro or Gypsy, claiming they have no negative connotations, which is clearly not true. We should not give the left reasons to accuse us of anything that we are not.